Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my trusty F-15E Strike Eagle. Yes, you heard that right. I too have succumbed to mudhead madness. It's an interesting aircraft, and one that I think we can do some interesting things with on the range, and that's what we're going to be doing today. As you would expect for this channel, we're actually going to focus on iron bombing in the F-15E, which it can do, although admittedly it isn't really its core mission. But for me, I always like to take a new aircraft out to the range. I guess because I spend so much time flying on the range, it really gives me a chance to understand how the aircraft flies. So we're doing a little bit of setup here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I want to set everything up in auto. So let me just redo that. The difference between auto and CDIP as bombing modes in the F-15E is CDIP is what is called ccip in every other aircraft, and auto is often called auto, but it's also called ccrp in some jets. So if you were watching, I basically have set up two programs, one of which will drop the bombs one station at a time, so that means two bombs at a time. And the other one is set up to drop all the bombs in ripple single. So as I mentioned, and as you probably saw, I set both programs up to drop the bombs in auto mode. But that's only because I want to show you how to actually switch back and forth between auto and CDIP on the fly, so to speak. I actually learned this, give credit where it's due, from a video that Casmo just released, but I had wondered about it, and it's actually very simple to do. The other thing we're going to talk about today is how to designate targets. Specifically, though, how to designate targets without using either the T-pod or the radar. So in real up-close and personal mode, what are the methods that you can use to designate a target? Because until you designate a target, you obviously can't drop on it in auto mode. So that's one of the things you need to figure out, is how to actually designate the targets if you want to use auto mode. And there are lots of other videos about using the radar and using the T-pod to designate targets. But I didn't find a lot about all the various ways you can do it without having to resort to either of the sensors. So I just wanted to cover that today. Just a useful little piece of trivia. So let's just get ourselves taken off. And then let's also talk a little bit about the F-15 and its background, because I think it's kind of a fascinating airplane. And I think you'll understand sort of how things work in the cockpit a little bit more if you understand some of the philosophy behind how it ended up being the way it is. I think the main thing that you need to know about the F-15E is that it was designed to be a strike platform, and strike has a very particular meaning in the U.S. Air Force. In fact, until the mid-1990s, strike meant nuclear strike. So an aircraft that is a strike aircraft is designed to go out and bomb targets probably fairly deep into enemy territory, and it means that it's pretty much designed to do a mission that is planned in advance. The target has been identified in advance, maybe even alternate targets have been identified in advance. There really isn't any sense that this is an aircraft that's going to go out and look for targets of opportunity. At least that's not how it was designed. You can see that by the level of planning that goes into setting up the displays and the bombing programs and everything on the runway. And that is a little bit different than most other aircraft. So what we're doing here today on the range, sort of fairly ad hoc bomb dropping, is really not in the central mission set of the F-15E. I understand that. But it's still useful to see how it actually handles itself on the range. Oops, I just need to pause here for a minute and point out that we're coming up on our first method of designating a target. We've crossed our first waypoint, and we now have the second waypoint active, and you will notice I've switched to air-to-ground mode, that it's not saying nav anymore, it's saying target 2 alpha. The reason it did that is because in the mission editor, I named this waypoint with the letter #T. And when you put a #T in the name of a waypoint in the mission editor, it will become a target when it becomes the active waypoint. So when we passed waypoint 1 and moved to waypoint 2, we now have a designated target. And you can tell that because when we aim not only does it say target on the HUD, but when we aim the aircraft at it, you can see that we have a little diamond, which basically means that we have a designated target. So that's the first way that you can designate a target, is by actually setting up in the mission editor as a target. Use a hash mark T in the name, and it will become a target when it becomes the active waypoint. Okay, so we have successfully designated a target. Now, let me show you how you can switch between auto and CDIP modes. First, you have to put the HUD in command. And you accomplish this by pressing your castle switch button and then pushing the castle switch forward. And when you do that, you get in command on the HUD. When you are there, you can switch back and forth between CDIP and auto modes by moving your target auto acquisition switch aft. Every time you press it aft, you will go from CDIP mode to auto, or vice versa. Basically, you'll toggle back and forth between the two modes. Now, since we have a target designated, I could use auto mode, but I'm actually going to do the first run here the old-fashioned way, as the saying goes. We're going to use CDIP, or what every other aircraft called ccip. And the symbology is absolutely bog standard. We have a flight path vector dropping down from the flight path vector. The F-15 calls it the designated impact line. Everybody else usually calls it the bomb fall line. At any rate, that vertical line then connects to the pipper at the bottom, and of course the objective is to put the pipper over the target and press the Pickle button, and that will put the bomb on the target. So we're turning base here. I'm a little bit farther out than I would like, so we'll have to adjust that maybe on the next round. But you can see the target there. I'm not going to worry about being... we're going to have a little bit shallower dive than I'd like, but it's not going to be a problem. So we're going to use the absolutely standard way of rolling in on a target. We're going to roll in. We're going to put the lift vector on the target, and then we're going to pull up until the flight path vector is basically over the target, and then we're going to roll out. And one of the first things that I noticed in the F-15, though, is that there is a lot of inertia in this aircraft. It is a big aircraft. When you pull up, you have to stop pulling up pretty early to make sure that you don't overshoot with the flight path vector. And that was a pretty good roll in. Here we are approaching the drop there. Alright, pretty hard to beat those results. So we've certainly proved that the F-15, with all of its fancy systems, can still drop iron bombs accurately. So let's, for the next run, let's go around, and so actually we've actually also discovered the second way of designating a target, although it wasn't really that obvious. Whenever you drop bombs on anything with CDIP, you automatically designate a target. So even though it won't look very much different, the second method of designating the target is to drop a bomb on something. And then the system will record that as the target and leave it designated. So we already have a designated target, and it's the one we dropped on last time. So this time we're going to go around and we're going to stay in auto mode. We're going to dive bomb just like we normally would. We're going to treat this as a CCRP system. You know, again, which I've said in other videos, is the same as the A4, the same as the Mirage. And even some modes in the Viggen. There is a notion that auto mode or CCRP mode is kind of a level bombing mode, but that is actually not true. In fact, I'm finding and reading accounts from pilots that most modern aircraft prefer to drop in this kind of auto mode rather than using CCIP, even though they're dropping in dive bombing mode. So we'll demonstrate that here. We're going to stay in auto mode. We're going to use exactly the same procedure. We're going to roll in, put the lift vector on the target, and then we're going to pull up towards it. And this time when we roll out, we're going to find that the flight path vector is on the bomb fall line, the steering line already, and all we have to do is let the flight path vector climb up that steering line, and then when we get a release indicator, which is going to be a horizontal line, we just pickle and hold, and the computer will take care of deciding when to release the bomb. So there we see the flight path vector coming up to the target. There's the steering line. We just let it climb up the steering line. There's our horizontal line, so we pickle and hold. and just hold steady. Don't have to keep pulling. A more accurate result if you're not yanking on the stick when you're trying to drop bombs. And we'll pull away, and we'll wait and see. Looks like a pretty good result, but we'll take a look and see what the target information tracking script has to say, or target impact tracking script has to say when it comes up here. Just a few seconds. Okay, so that's two ways of designating a target. We have used the, not a bad drop, still not diving quite as steeply as I'd like to. I'm going to have to try and sort of snuggle that up a little bit more. So we've looked at two ways of designating a target. We have designated the target in the mission editor. We've designated a target by dropping a bomb on it. Now you see that I have undesignated the target. To do that, you use your boat switch. Boat switch aft will reject or undesignate a target. We have to do this because the next way of designating a target requires that you don't have one designated before you employ it. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Really, this next way of designating a target is pretty much identical to the way you would do it in the A4. So sort of the original bombing computer used this method. And so what we're going to do is we're going to roll in just like before. We're going to aim the pipper at the target, and then we're going to pickle, and we're going to hold the pickle. As soon as we pickle, it's going to designate what the pipper is over as the target, and then we're going to see the steering line, and then we're going to be able to let the flight path vector climb up the steering line, and once again the bombs will go when it's time. And like I said, this is exactly the way the A4 works. So there's really nothing new here, although it's not a method that gets used a lot in other kinds of aircraft. Okay, so oops, I need to pull a little harder. This isn't a great roll-in. It's taking too long, but anyways. Okay, let's get the flight path vector over the target. There. Pickle and hold. You get the steering line. There go the bombs. Okay, yeah, that was a little bit lower than I really would have liked it to be, but that's just because it was a lousy roll-in. I just wasn't pulling hard enough. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with the way the target acquisition worked. So as you can see, that works exactly the same way as it would have been in an A4. Pickle and hold, and drop on the designated target. Now, I've undesignated the target again, and this time we're going to look at the fourth method of designating a target, and we're going to use our TDC to do that now. Even though I undesignated the previous target, I didn't have to. That's the one difference between doing this with the TDC and doing it with the pickle button, is that the TDC can designate a new target when you already have one designated. When you use the method we just used, the pickle and hold method, you can't do that if there is already a designated target, obviously, because the computer doesn't know whether you're trying to drop on the current target or designate a new one. So if you already have a target designated and you don't want to or haven't undesignated it for some reason, then you have to use the TDC to designate the target. But the procedure is absolutely identical other than that. You'll put the pipper over the target, you'll press the TDC button to designate the target, and then you'll get a steering line, and then you can, anytime after that, you can pickle and hold, and the bombs will go when it is time. Let's change targets here this time. Let's go take a look at that white hangar this time, just to show we can do this on different targets. So we're pulling up. Again, you can see there's quite a bit of inertia. I got to stop pulling, let the aircraft catch up so that I don't pull past the target. And right about there, I'm going to designate, and then I'm just going to let the flight path vector move up the steering line. And we dropped a little long. And I would say, I think I designated in front of the target. So there have been some reports that auto mode has some trouble sometimes and drops a little bit long. I'm not sure that's always true, and it certainly isn't. In this case, it's not a massive difference, but I don't think those bombs landed where I designated. 20 meters long. In point of fact, if we weren't using the target impact tracking script, you might not even know if we were just aiming at stuff on the ground. So I don't know if this is a serious issue or not, but I'd say that was a little bit less accurate than I would have expected kind of a CCRP drop to be, but who knows. Again, it was also fairly low by the time we designated the target. So this time, let's just look at actually using a pre-designated target again. I'll tell you, honestly, I'm just trying to use up my last 2 bombs here in this rack, because I want the rack to reconstitute itself so I can do drop all 12 there with the second program. So we got to find a couple things to do here. So this time, let's see if we can drop a lot higher. So for one thing, I'm going to climb quite a bit higher. We'll go up to 13,000 feet or so, and I'm going to I'm going to leave the target designated, so I don't have to actually worry about designating the target when I roll in. And I'm just going to try and see how high above the target I can actually drop. Without going into level bombing mode, I still want to use dive bombing mode because I think that it's a more accurate way of lining up. Anybody's ever tried to use the steering line in level mode, will confirm that it's a difficult thing to get it exactly on. I think the dive bombing mode is more accurate, but hopefully we can demonstrate we can get it done at a slightly higher altitude than we've been dropping. So, same process. Got to get that flight path vector up to the target at the base of the steering line, get it rolled out. That was pretty good. And now we're just going to let it climb up the steering line, and we're just going to hold a lot higher above the target. And that's going to mean that we drop a lot higher, and clearly a higher altitude drop there. And let's see how we do. Interesting. Basically, those bombs went into the same hole the last pair did, which is not surprising given that I didn't change the target designation. So, if the bombs are going a little long, it does seem to be systematic. It's not a lot though, but I would say it's noticeable, at least when you're quantifying it. Again, 20 meters or so long. But definitely dropped at a much higher altitude. So let's try one more try here. Use up our last set of bombs. Let's go back to CDIP mode. And again, I'll start from a higher altitude, and I'll try to roll in as efficiently as I can and see if we can actually get these dropped in good old manual mode. Well, it's not really manual, but as manual as it gets with computer assistance. Anyways, we'll drop them in CDIP mode, and we'll see how high we can drop them and see how that compares to how we did in auto mode. And this may be a clue to why, auto mode is the preferred mode, because even dropping unguided bombs, it's been important, particularly in the last few conflicts, like in the Gulf War and in Serbia, or Kosovo, I should say. To be able to drop very high, because that's really the way to stay out of the way of the Manpad's IR missiles, and also out of the way of the AAA. So dropping it at a good height is really a real premium on that, and I think that's partly why auto mode is used, because it's just easier to drop at a higher altitude and easier to be more accurate on, honestly, when you're dropping high. But let's just compare here. So we're going to roll in. Try and efficiently get ourselves up to the target, but we got to be careful we don't overshoot. Careful we don't overshoot. Roll out. Let the flight path vector climb up. I'm trying not to pull too hard, even though we're coming down lower than I'd like. And right about there. Well, those bombs seem to go a lot closer to where I think the Pipper was when I pickled. But be that as it may, we have demonstrated that we certainly could hit a target. We didn't quite... we were not quite as high as we were in auto mode, because I did... my roll-in wasn't as efficient as it could have been. It's still not bad. And with some practice, you could probably make it better. So far we have looked at 4 ways of designating targets. We've done it by designating them as a waypoint. We have done it by dropping a bomb on them. We've done it using the pickle and hold method, and we've done it using the TDC, and we've experimented with a bunch of different ways of prosecuting that target once it has been designated. So for the last drop in this video, just for entertainment's sake, let's make a nice long linear drop. There aren't all that many aircraft that can carry 12 Mark 82s without even getting beyond the 2 inner pylons like the F-15E can. So let's just see what kind of damage we can wreak if we drop 12 of those in a line. And to do that, we have switched to Program 2. So as a reminder, Program 2 is going to drop all 12 bombs in ripple, single, with 100 units between them. It's not clear to me exactly what the units are. I'm not sure that they're meters, because you get different results depending on the angle you dive at. I don't know if it might be a timing thing, whether it's milliseconds, maybe it's supposed to be meters. I'm not convinced that that's what it is, though. At any rate, we're going to drop them in an interval of 100, all 12 bombs. So I have actually gone back out here and we're taking a much more shallow run at the target, because that's the best way to spread the bombs out. Okay, we're going to use the TDC designation method. I prefer that to the pickle and hold. Get it up to about where we want it, and then we're going to press the TDC. We're going to get a steering line, and then as the release cue comes down, we're going to pickle and we're going to hold. And we got to remember to hold until the reticle disappears, because that's how long it takes to drop all of the bombs. We're going to pull off and see how we did. I'm not all that pleased with those results, to tell you the truth. And again, I'm not sure that those bombs are dropping where I thought they were supposed to. It's not bad, but I guess I was probably off a little bit to the left, a little hard to tell, but I certainly don't think I designated that far long. So I think, again, maybe we're having an issue, and this doesn't show you all that much, just shows you where the average landed. You can, by the way, if you are using the target impact tracking script, there is a way to actually see all of the impacts. I'll just show that to you quickly. So if you want, you can parse through those. I think the bottom line is that even the closest bomb landed a good distance beyond the target, and I don't think I designated beyond the target. So maybe there is a little bit of an issue with auto mode in the F-15E, especially. The word is that the closer you are to level, the more the problem is exacerbated. So that would match here as well. But at any rate, I don't think it's a serious problem. It certainly doesn't stop you from enjoying the aircraft. As was a few things with the F-15E, we'll stand by and see if there's any changes to that in the coming days as early access progresses. Hope you're enjoying the Mud Hen. I know that I certainly am. And for now, this is going to be Sidekick.